Before continuing on to the lesser-known texts, I wanted to discuss the Synoptic Gospels, particularly Marcion versus Mark. When it comes to all the Synoptic Gospels, it appears to be obvious that applying the exact rules that modern scholars apply to the current two-source hypothesis, but adding Marcion, that Marcion must come before Luke and Matthew. Every argument that scholars use to have Mark predate Luke and Matthew is also satisfied by the text of Marcion. Marcion cannot follow Luke and does not appear to be able to follow Matthew either. When it comes to Mark versus Marcion, however, there is in essence a draw. The problem is the nature of the two texts. It would technically be possible for either text to follow the other. However, the assertion by modern scholars that Mark is somehow written poorly and is therefore early simply ignores the apocalyptic aspects of this text. There is nothing in Mark that looks like it was placed accidentally. The crudeness or the sense of urgency detailed in the text appears to be by design. The claim that Mark is simply a less capable writer is not supported by the design of his own text. The question, of course, is why would Mark be written at all, and who would likely read this book? And the answer to that question isn't so clear. Except for the Montanists in the latter half of the 2nd century, apocalyptic texts were probably not so widespread, and it is highly questionable as to whether or not this text was originally intended to be circulated among average Christians. Later, with Irenaeus, we have a description of the followers of the Gospel of John, Matthew, and Marcion, and an apologetic argument for Luke, but we do not have a description of the followers of Mark. Why is Mark different? While it is certainly possible that Mark might precede Marcion, it is also possible that Mark actually intended his book to be apocalyptic. If the crudeness of Mark is intentional, then there is no reason at all why the Gospel of Mark cannot follow Marcion. It would be purely speculative to assume that Mark was a poor writer. The complexity of his text simply doesn't support the idea, and the assumption that the immediacy displayed by Mark is anything but apocalyptic is a judgment call. Since there is no other evidence that Mark would predate Marcion at this time, I see no reason to address anything else about this relationship. There does not seem to be an early theology that followed Mark specifically. The text is virtually untraceable before Papias and Irenaeus, and Papias himself seems to give an apologetic argument for Mark as if his audience simply objects to this text. There simply is nothing here to bring Mark earlier, and until there is, these are the dates I have.